Now speaking, Andy Barnett, Head of Investor Relations. Thank you for joining us for AstraZeneca's first half and second quarter 2023 conference call. We are pleased to report that our core financial numbers and non-GAAP measures have improved significantly compared to the same period last year. Our agenda for today's call includes a review of our performance, a discussion of our new initiatives and major announcements, and a Q&A session. We will be using constant exchange rates, or SUR, core financial numbers, and other non-GAAP measures. Non-GAAP to GAAP reconciliation is contained within the results announcement. Numbers used are millions of US dollars unless otherwise stated. Now speaking, Pascal Soriot, Chief Executive Officer. Thank you. In the first half of the year, total revenue increased 4% to $22.3 billion, with 16% growth in non-core medicines offsetting a $2.2 billion decline in COVID-19 medicines revenue. Core earnings per share increased 21% to $4.04, reflecting both strong business performance and a gain following an update to contractor relationships in the U.S. We saw double-digit growth across the EU and Europe, as well as strong growth in emerging markets outside of China, which grew 38%. Our diverse commercial portfolio and global footprint have enabled us to deliver robust double-digit growth across oncology, severe RNI, and rare disease. 8 medicines delivered over $1 billion H1 product sales, with strong performance from Imfinzi, Farxiga, Ultomiris, HER2, Calquence, Breast03, Troponine, and Safnilo. We remain confident in our outlook for the remainder of the year and have reiterated our 2023 guidance. We have progressed 14 new molecular entities into late-stage development and are making good progress toward initiating 30 new pivotal trials this year, with 9 already initiated. We have seen 8 positive pivotal oncology trials already this year, including the TROPION-Lung01 trial of Dato DD. Now speaking, Aradhana Sarin, Chief Financial Officer. Good afternoon, everyone. Our reported P&L for the first half of the year showed total revenue increased by 4% to $2.3 billion. Total revenue excluding COVID-19 medicines increased 16%. Alliance revenue of $627 million includes $475 million of HER2 profit sharing from geographies where Daiichi Sankyo books product sales. Collaboration revenue of $220 million includes $180 million license fee from Serum Institute of India booked in the second quarter relating to our COVID-19 and antibody license agreement. Core product sales gross margin in the first half was 82.9%, benefiting from lower production costs in prior quarters, and certain non-recurring items in the first quarter. We expect the product sales gross margin on a full-year basis to be slightly higher than pre-COVID-19 levels. Core operating expenses in the half increased by 8%, R&D costs increased by 9%, driven by continued investments in our pipeline. Other operating income of $1.1 billion includes $712 million related to the previously announced updated agreements on the Beyfortus, which was booked in the second quarter. The tax rate in the second quarter was lower than full-year guidance due to certain tax incentives and mix of profits and lower tax legal entities. For the full year, we continue to expect this core tax rate will be between 8% and 22%. Core EPS of $4.07 in the first half represents an increase of 21% at constant exchange rates. Net cash inflow from operating activities increased by $400 million to $4.9 billion, and we continue to see improvement in our cash conversion. Net debt increased by $1 billion to $24 billion, driven by the payment of the second interim dividend in March and $2.4 billion in deal payments. We are reiterating our 2023 total revenue and core EPS guidance. Total revenues are expected to increase by low to mid-single-digit percentage. Excluding COVID-19, total revenue are expected to increase by low double-digit percentage. Growth in the second half will be hampered by patented expiries, including Syncor in the US and Nexium in Japan. We now anticipate revenue in China to increase by a low to mid-single-digit percentage. We now anticipate total operating expenses on the R end of the range, with phasing of SG&A costs toward the second half of the year, similar to prior years. Based on June average FX rates, we now anticipate a low single-digit adverse FX impact on total revenue and a low to mid-single-digit adverse impact on core EPS. We are leveraging AI to accelerate drug development manufacturing processes and drive supply chain efficiencies. We have reduced en route synthesis lead times from 9 to 12 months to 5 to 6 months, and we're striving to further reduce lead times to less than 3 months. Additionally, with this tool, we have been able to reduce the number of experimental trials, cutting lead times and driving efficiencies in case while also providing sustainability benefits through fewer synthetic steps. We've implemented AI-enabled enhancements across our supply chain. For example, Sweden is one of our largest global sites, manufacturing over 12 billion tablets and capsules every year. Here, we use AI-powered digital twins that can leverage multiple data sources simultaneously, such as production orders, dispensing stations, and cleaning status to optimize production schedules. This technology has already delivered a 90% improvement in scheduling time. Our 2023 total revenue and core EPS guidance is to increase by low to mid-single-digit percentage and low double-digit percentage, respectively. We anticipate total operating expenses on the R end of the range, with phasing of SG&A costs toward the second half of the year, similar to prior years. We anticipate a low single-digit adverse FX impact on total revenue and a low to mid-single-digit adverse impact on core EPS. We are leveraging AI to accelerate drug development manufacturing processes and drive supply chain efficiencies, resulting in a 90% improvement in scheduling time. Now speaking, Dave Fredrickson, Executive Vice President, Oncology Business. We are pleased to report our oncology medicines delivered total revenues in the first half of $8.8 billion, an increase of 22% versus the prior year. Tagrisso global revenues grew 10%, reflecting strong underlying demand for DORA and FLAURA across all regions. Following the ASCO plenary presentation of ADAURA overall survival data last month, we expect expanded use of Tagrisso in the adjuvant setting as well as potential for new reimbursements in certain geographies. Lynparza remains the leading PARP inhibitor globally and delivered sales growth of 9%. Imfinzi total revenues, inclusive of Imjudo, surpassed $1 billion in a quarter for the first time, up 58% and largely driven by new launches of Topaz, Himalaya, and Poseidon. Calquence total revenues increased 34% year-on-year, supported by ex-US demand growth, particularly in Europe. HER2 total revenues of $322 million in the second quarter increased 176% year-on-year. We received approval for DESTINY-Breast03 in China last quarter, and approval for HER2 and HER2-low metastatic breast cancer. We also received approval for Propel in the US and anticipate a potential regulatory milestone to be paid in the second half of the year. We were granted priority review in the US for Capitala 291. Imfinzi and Imjudo have seen remarkable growth, driven by the recent launches of Topaz, Himalaya, and Poseidon. At ESMO World GI, we presented unprecedented 4-year overall survival data for unresectable HCC. Topaz has become the undisputed standard of care within months in the US, EU, and Japan. We're making progress with Poseidon in the US and in Europe. Matterhorn in gastric and gastroesophageal junction cancer was the first global phase 3 trial of IO plus FLAT that demonstrates statistically significant pathologic complete response. In endometrial cancer, Dato showed Imfinzi plus Lynparza and Imfinzi alone significantly improved progression-free survival. We look forward to additional phase 3 readouts with Pacific 2 in lung cancer and Emerald 1 in GI. We are advancing our next wave of IO with our novel bispecifics, volrustomig and ribaglustimig, and sabistamig. Now speaking, Susan Galbraith, Executive Vice President, Oncology Research and Development. Our company had an exciting first half of the year with 8 positive pivotal trial readouts. At ASCO, we presented data from the Tagrisso ADAURA trial, demonstrating unprecedented survival in early-stage EGFR-mutated lung cancer, as well as the first data from the ADAURA trial, highlighting the potential of PARP inhibition plus immunotherapy in advanced ovarian cancer. Additionally, interim data from the DESTINY-PanTumor02 trial showed HER2 resulted in clinically meaningful progression-free survival and overall survival. We reported high-level results for 8 pivotal trials this quarter, including FLAURA2, which demonstrated a strong clinically meaningful improvement in progression-free survival for patients with EGFR-mutated non-small cell lung cancer. DUO-E is the first phase 3 trial of immunotherapy plus PARP inhibition to demonstrate clinical benefit in advanced endometrial cancer. Matterhorn demonstrated a statistically significant and clinically meaningful improvement with Imfinzi plus FLOT versus FLOT chemotherapy alone in the key secondary endpoint of pathologic complete response. We recently announced weighted high-level results from the first phase 3 trial for Dato-DD, the TROPION-Lung01 trial, which investigated Dato-DD versus docetaxel in second- or third-line non-small cell lung cancer and demonstrated a statistically significant improvement in progression-free survival and an early trend in overall survival. We have 3 active phase 3 trials in the frontline setting, investigating Dato-DD in combination with immune checkpoint inhibitors, TROPION-Lung0708 and AVANCE-R. Our first phase 3 trial for breast cancer is due to read out later this year. TROPION-Breast01 investigates Dato-DD versus chemotherapy in patients with hormone receptor-positive HER2-negative metastatic breast cancer that have received at least 1 prior line of chemotherapy. We also have 2 phase 3s focused on triple-negative breast cancer. TROPION-Breast02 investigates where the Dato-DD can replace chemotherapy in first-line patients not eligible to PD-1 or PD-L1 inhibition. And TROPION-Breast03 investigates the role of adjuvant Dato-DD with or without Imfinzi in early triple-negative disease. We are on track to deliver on the promise of Dato-DD in lung and breast cancer, and TROPION-PanTumor01 and 03 are generating the data needed to support further investments in the future. Now speaking, Ruud Dobber, Executive Vice President and President, Biopharmaceuticals. Biopharmaceuticals delivered total revenue of $9.1 billion in the first half of the year, with both CVRM and RNI posting double-digit growth. Farxiga total revenue grew 41% to $1.5 billion in the quarter, driven by continued uptake in CKD and heart failure. Farxiga is now approved in 62 countries for patients with heart failure with preserved ejection fraction and has recently gained approval in the United States for delivery. Fasenra, Bracestri, Tezspire, and Safnilo combined for 48% growth in the first half. These brands made up 46% of RNI total revenue in the second quarter, up from 36% in the first quarter. Super will be added to the portfolio in 2024. Fasenra grew 16% to $406 million, driven by strong demand in the US and Europe. Tezspire delivered $81 million in total revenue in the second quarter, up from just $13 million last year, and is now available in 11 markets. Symbicort total revenue in the second quarter remains stable, but generic competition is expected in the US in the back half of the year. Befirtus was approved in the US and product sales have begun. AstraZeneca manufactured Befirtus and supplies product to Sanofi for distribution, and alliance revenue is earned on Sanofi's Befirtus sales outside the US. Befirtus is expected to be available to protect infants in the US and Europe ahead of the 2023 RSV season. Farxiga's decade-long development plan has led to its mortality benefits being available to patients globally, and further opportunities are expected with combination therapies. Phase 3 decisions for Farxiga combinations are expected later this year. Now speaking, Mene Pangalos, Executive Vice President, Biopharmaceuticals Research and Development. Thanks, Rude. Our recent medical congresses showcased data for Tozorakimab, our anti-IL-33 monoclonal antibody, and highlighted the importance of real-world data and patient outcomes across RNI and CVRM. At the American Thoracic Society Congress, lung tissue samples taken from patients with COVID-19 showed higher levels of IL-33 in the airway tissues, providing further rationale for targeting IL-33 in severe viral infections in our Phase 3 GLIA trial. Real-world data also highlighted the importance of prompt intervention with Bracestri, showing that initiating treatment within 30 days following a moderate or severe COPD exacerbation decreased the risk of future exacerbations by 24% versus delaying treatment by 6 months and by 34% versus delaying treatment 6 months to 1 year. At the European Renal Association, the multinational study Reveal CKD demonstrated that 85% to 95% of stage 3 CKD remains undiagnosed. Data also showed that delaying diagnosis by just 1 year resulted in an increased risk of deterioration, kidney transplant or long-term dialysis treatment. The ZORA study supported continued concomitant use of potassium binders in ROSI patients who experience hyperkalemia. We have a portfolio of antisense oligonucleotides across amyloidosis, NASH, and CKD in clinical development. ARMPLA3 AZD 2693 dosed in Phase 2b in NASH this quarter following promising Phase 1 data, which showed a steatosis reduction in positive gene knockdown at 12 weeks. AZD 8630 is a human anti-TSLP fragment antibody formulated for inhaled dry powder delivery and is currently in Phase 1 in patients with polycontrolled asthma with data expected later this year. We're also expecting data from our NGF-TNA bispecific monoclonal antibody currently in Phase 2 for the treatment of OA pain and neuropathic pain. With the acquisition of Alexion, our gene therapy ambitions have also accelerated significantly, utilizing our proprietary CRISPR gene editing platform to address challenging rare diseases. We are also working with Alexion teams to optimize the therapeutic window through the use of novel tissue-directed capsids and tissue-specific promoters, with the potential to offer curative treatments for rare genetic diseases. Now speaking, Marc Dunoyer, Executive Vice President, Biopharmaceuticals Research and Development. In the first half of the year, Alexion's rare disease total revenue grew 12%, contributing $3.8 billion. Growth was driven by increased demand and benefited from timing of tender market orders. Ultomiris, a new drug, grew 60% in the second quarter due to naive patient growth, new market launches, and successful conversions from Soliris. Soliris declined 19%. In the second half of the year, there may be headwinds due to pricing pressure related to Ultomiris launches and potential for Soliris biosimilar entry in Europe. Strensiq and Koselugo grew 25% and 30%, respectively, reflecting underlying patient demand and expansion into new markets. ALXN 2220 Phase 1 data were presented at the European Society of Cardiology in patients with transthyretin amyloid cardiomyopathy, showing remarkable reduction in cardiac amyloid deposition over 4 and 12 months. Alexion has also acquired a portfolio of gene therapy programs from Pfizer to accelerate its timeframe to bring potentially transformative and curative treatments to patients. Now speaking, Pascal Soriot, Chief Executive Officer. We have made significant progress in tackling the climate crisis with our Ambition Zero Carbon program and our partnership with Vanguard Renewables to deliver renewable natural gas to all our U.S. sites by 2026. We have also committed $500 million to plant and maintain 200 million trees across 6 continents by 2030, positively impacting an estimated 80,000 livelihoods. Our transition plan is verified by the Science Based Targets initiative, which focuses on deep decarbonization, allowing for only 10% residual emissions removals by 2045. We are also partnering with suppliers to commit to minimum climate and sustainability targets that contribute to decarbonizing the healthcare value chain. We have a number of important pivotal trial readouts this year, including 2 trials in breast cancer, 2 trials in non-small cell lung cancer, a trial with Fasenra and IPA, and the first results of our next-generation COVID-19 antibody AZD3152. We also have a rich catalyst path in 2024, which includes DESTINY-Breast06 and LOAR results from both of which are now expected in the first half of 2024. Lastly, we announced that Mene Pangalos will retire after almost 14 years with the company and will be succeeded by Sharon Barr, currently head of research and product development at Alexion. Bank of America Merrill Lynch analyst Sachin Jain inquired, "What are your thoughts on the efficacy and safety of Dato in first-line lung cancer? Could you provide an update on TLA2's 8 months of PFS from ASCO? What should we focus on for TL04 in lung cancer? What is your confidence in TB01 potentially being better than TROPiCS-02 with an 8-month PFS? What is your confidence in DB09 potentially doubling PFS compared to the control?" Susan Galbraith replied, "Thanks for the question, Sachin. The TL01 study was positive, and we've now treated over 200 patients across all our first-line lung studies with the Dato-DD plus immune checkpoint inhibitor combination. We're comfortable with the safety profile we've seen. In TROPION-Lung02, we're encouraged by the response rate and durability of response for both the doublet and triple combinations. TROPION-Lung04 is a Phase 1b study looking at the combination of Dato-DD plus immune checkpoint inhibition in cancer. For breast cancer, we think Dato-DD is a best-in-class ADC with numerically higher response rates across a number of different settings. We'll have to wait for the readout of the trial for confirmation. DESTINY-Breast09 is event-driven and accruing rapidly. Wolfe Research analyst Tim Anderson inquired, "Given the context of the discussion, my question is, how has the modest benefit of TROPION-Lung01 impacted your enthusiasm for the program, and what can we expect from it in other tumor types or settings? What can you tell us about the retrospective biomarker analysis of TLO and its results by TROP2 expression levels?" Susan Galbraith replied, "Thank you, Tim. We're confident in the data from TROPION-Lung01 and have had encouraging conversations with the FDA. We're looking forward to sharing the full data at an upcoming conference which will provide a more complete picture. We believe Dato-DX has potential to be an important medicine for multiple cancer types, including lung cancer. We're still conducting biomarker analysis and will update you with data once we've completed our announcement." Citi analyst Andrew Baum inquired, "Susan and Mark, could you comment on the population you are targeting with TROPION-Lung01 and the outcome trial for the amyloid monitor? Will it be based on 6-minute work or mortality?" Susan Galbraith replied, "Yes, Andrew. In TL01, we stratified patients by their most immediate prior therapy, including anti-PD-L1 or PD-1 immunotherapy, geographical region, histology, and squamous versus non-squamous. We also included patients with actionable genomic alterations, though that was a later protocol amendment in only a minority of the patients. I cannot comment on our ongoing dialogue with the FDA at this time." Pascal Soriot replied, "I believe our agent will be beneficial to a large population of lung cancer patients." Mark, would you like to address the second question? Mark Dunoyer replied, "Yes, we are in ongoing discussion with the FDA to confirm the protocol for Phase 3. In response to your question, we will not be including 6-minute walking distance as an endpoint. Our endpoints will focus on mortality and cardiovascular morbidity, with the potential addition of a third-tier endpoint." Morgan Stanley analyst Mark Purcell inquired, "Dave, what is the sales split for Calquence and the BTK market in CLL between first-line and second-line refractory patients?" Susan, what is the importance of TROP2 testing for TROP2 ADCs and how will retrospective data on TROP2 expression be accepted by regulators? Dave Fredrickson replied, "Thank you, Mark. We see about half of new patient starts of total BTK starts in CLL in the frontline setting, and the other half in the relapsed/refractory setting. Of that, 25% are in patients who are naive and the other 75% have been pretreated with BTKI. In the US, our share position has held strong in the frontline setting, but we have seen erosion of our share in the relapsed/refractory setting, particularly within the naive. We remain the leaders in this space, though it is a tight share split among the 3 players. For TROPION-Breast01, we are seeking category leadership in breast cancer. Across the G7 countries, there are over 35,000 fourth-line and beyond patients treated in hormone receptor-positive and HER2-negative disease. Our approach is to understand how patient selection and sequencing can create opportunities for both HER2 and Dato-DX, and to have an AstraZeneca medicine that is appropriate for various subtypes and sequences over time. We are looking to replace chemotherapy across late-line breast cancer as a category. Susan Galbraith replied, biomarker development for Dato-DX is a priority. We are working on a biomarker for the TROP2 program, leveraging data from TL01. We strive for prospective selection in trials to ensure balance, but there are examples of retrospective analysis that have enabled approval. ABG Sundal Collier analyst Gonzalo Ortiz inquired, can you provide insight into the potential for a tumor-agnostic approval based on the data presented yesterday for Destiny Pan-Tumor-02? How does the debate around HER2 expression levels and grades factor into this potential approval? What were the results of PFS and OS when using IHC3+? Susan Galbraith replied, thank you for the question. We saw impressive response rates and durability of response across multiple tumor types in the Pan-Tumor-02 study, particularly in gynecologic cancers such as endometrial, ovarian and cervical. We also saw an enhanced response rate in the IHC3+ compared to the IHC2+ populations. The trial included a mix of genotypes with different lines of therapy and a heavily pretreated patient population. Progression-free survival and overall survival data back up the response rate and durability of response. There are differences between IHC3+ and 2+, which establishes differentiation from standard of care chemotherapy. Patients beyond the IHC3+ are also benefiting beyond what is expected from standard of care. Initial discussions with regulatory authorities, including the FDA, are encouraging. As those develop, we can provide more details. Exane BNP Paribas analyst Richard Parkes inquired, what is the difference between the level of optimism at the time of the press release and what you're communicating now regarding TL01? What caused the contradiction in the communication? What progress have you made towards phase 3 and when will the durability of response data at the lower dose be presented? Susan Galbraith replied, the definition of clinically meaningful in terms of what clinicians are looking for takes into account the difference in medium and shape of the KM curves, hazard ratio, response rate, durability of response, safety profile, and patient population. We have found the data encouraging and have had discussions with the FDA. We plan to file on the basis of this encouraging response, but cannot provide more details at this time. Our program is advancing at the pace we have indicated, with a number of phase 2 trials in planning. We will share the data at an upcoming medical congress when it is mature and appropriate to do so. Pascal Soriot replied, thank you, Richard. Our partner Daiichi Sankyo and us have a policy of only disclosing high-level results. What you saw in the announcement was the high-level results. We have seen the detailed results and can explain some of the discrepancies, but a better understanding will come when you see the results of future congress. Skandinaviska and Skildebanken analyst Christopher Uda inquired, what are the factors determining the timeline from top-line to UA for Supernova's COVID antibody update? How are you planning to brand it, and what are the growth levers for Fasenra going forward? How do you view competition from GSK's ultra-extended half-life IL-5? Aradhana Saran replied, thanks Christopher for your question and ongoing interest in this area. We are making great progress with AZD 3152, a long-acting monoclonal antibody for the prevention and treatment of COVID-19 in immunocompromised patients. The Supernova trial is on track and we recently updated the trial design in consultation with the FDA to expedite emergency approval in the US. We are now conducting a sub-study to bridge the data and anticipate having results by the end of the year. We are also continuing the Supernova trial with efficacy endpoints, with readout expected in Q1 2021. This will enable us to seek approval outside of the US. Regarding branding, we are in discussions with the FDA and EMA and will provide an update on the brand name once we have agreement from both agencies. Ru Daber replied, Fasenra's growth drivers in the foreseeable future are biopenetration, China, and the outcome of Fasenra and EQPA later this year. Biopenetration is currently low, ranging from 15 to 25%, providing a large opportunity for growth. In China, we have filed based on the outstanding Miracle trial, with results expected next year. Lastly, the outcome of Fasenra and EQPA later this year will be an important growth driver for the brand. The competitive landscape for long-acting biologics is strong, but biopenetration across the board is still low, so more competitors will help grow the market. JP Morgan Chase & Company analyst James Gordon inquired, James Gordon, JP Morgan. What changes are planned for the Dato program following the recent update? Are any trials being adjusted to target a subpopulation with stronger efficacy? Are any new phase 3 trials planned for Dato? Is Imfinzi and HER2 expected to be the two key growth drivers for the remainder of the decade? Susan Galbraith replied, we are continuing to plan new phase 3 trials with Dato-DD. TROP02 is highly expressed across many tumor types, including lung cancer. To predict patient response to ADCs, we consider receptor expression, internalization and sensitivity to the warhead. We are actively working on biomarkers to identify those most likely to respond. Dave Fredrickson replied, Imfinzi is an important part of our business and we've made investments in its life cycle plan and clinical development plan. We're seeing positive readouts and taking advantage of them commercially. About 20 to 30% of Imfinzi's growth is coming from the established portfolio, with the rest from new launches like Topaz, Himalaya and Poseidon. Topaz has achieved market share of over 50% in the markets it's launched in, and Himalaya has had a good uptake. We have regulatory approvals in over 50 markets, but only 10 have reimbursement, including the US and Japan. We still have a lot of countries to come on board, so the outlook for Imfinzi is strong. Barclays analyst Emily Field inquired, what is the impact of the competitor asset on Lynparza sales in second-line ovarian cancer, and what is driving the raised guidance for China? Dave Fredrickson replied, yes, Emily, thanks for the question. PARP class starts in ovarian cancer have been declining over the course of the year due to lower desire from medical oncologists to treat in the second-line setting. We've been doing a good job driving PULA and solo indications, but those gains are being offset by second-line declines. Currently, second-line represents a minority of our ovarian cancer business. We're making nice progress with PROPEL outside of the US and Europe, and we're hopeful that even with a narrower PROPEL label, we can continue to drive growth in Lynparza. We also look forward to hopefully having a regulatory path forward with Dato. Leon Wang replied, yes, regarding China guidance, we have some headwinds due to oncology price cuts from the NRDL renewal last year and the VVP for a large product. However, we are looking forward to launching rare disease and Enhertu in China, as well as Imfinzi, Topaz, and Himalaya. Symbicort is experiencing strong growth for the second year in a row, and Pulmicort has recovered from the VVP impact and is now growing. Farxiga is also a major growth driver, along with Hosha and other CDM products. In the next 1 to 3 years, we will be launching many new indications and products, and the Chinese government is treating innovation better than before, which is a positive sign for the NRDL policy. Nordea Markets analyst Victor Sundberg inquired, what are the headwinds that have kept you from raising or refining your 2023 guidance, and what is driving the strong growth of Imfinzi in the rest of the world category? Aradhana Saran replied, yes, thank you Pascal and Victor. We are reiterating our guidance for the year. We anticipate a progressive impact from the Simcor generic in the US Nexium, as well as a decline in legacy brands deals. Additionally, we expect to see an increase in R&D costs in the second half of the year. Lastly, Imfinzi rest of world is on track to meet our expectations. Dave Fredrickson replied, Victor, as I mentioned before, the success of Imfinzi and Judo in the quarter is largely driven by the rapid uptake of Topaz 1 and the reimbursement of Judo that has allowed us to move forward with Himalaya. This has enabled us to see strong sales in our established rest of world markets, particularly Japan. Cohen & Company analyst Steve Scala inquired, Dave, in 2022, do you still expect HER2 to be one of the largest oncology medicines? Susan, will AstraZeneca adjust the study design of Tropion-Lung07 and Tropion-Lung08 based on TL01 results? Dave Fredrickson replied, I continue to believe that HER2 has the potential to be one of the most transformative medicines in cancer treatment. The pan-tumor-02 data suggests that HER2 could be used to treat more than just breast, gastric and lung cancer. Similarly, I'm confident that Dato has the potential to be as big as HER2. The positive Phase 3 readout reinforces this confidence. The deal on Dato was made with the goal of replacing systemic chemotherapy in lung and breast cancer, but the real opportunity for Dato to be bigger than HER2 is if it can be used to treat other tumor types. Pascal Soriot replied, we have a lot of data points for HER2 that indicate the potential is very large. Susan Galbraith replied, thanks for the question. We have indeed learned some valuable insights from the Tropion Lung trial. As is typical in drug development, as we gain more knowledge, there may be adaptations to the trial. We remain confident that this medicine has great potential in treating lung cancer, including in the first-line settings of the trials currently underway. Redburn Partners analyst Simon Baker inquired, what can you tell us about the Pfizer deal? What characteristics does it bring in terms of selectivity and payload capacity? Are you still actively developing NLRP3 inflammasome inhibitors for inflammatory bowel disease? Mark Dunoyer replied, Simon, our agreement with Pfizer involves a dozen preclinical constructs and assets, as well as a large number of capsides that have been developed over the years. We anticipate that these capsides can be further refined to create the best possible capsid for both CNS and cardiotropic assets. We expect to begin clinical trials on these projects within the next 1 to 3 years, in addition to refining the capsides to create the optimal product for the right issue. Pascal Soriot replied, we are making progress in our election portfolio and cardiovascular aspirator immunology portfolio. We are also making progress in VM, although it is still at an early stage. In response to Simon's question, I look forward to the day when we can show you the progress we have made. Mene Pongalos replied, it's a great question. We have an interest in building our immunology capability and specifically in autoimmune diseases like IBD. We have a phase 1 anti-CCR9 antibody program that has demonstrated a dramatic lowering of T regulatory cells in the gut. We also recently did a deal with Quell, a small company in the TREG space, to explore how we can lock TREG cells to maintain their anti-inflammatory state, with IBD being one of the indications. Guggenheim Partners analyst Seamus Fernandez inquired, can you provide an update on AstraZeneca's strategic shift in light of the change in leadership and Mene's retirement? Is the company moving away from primary care opportunities, such as diabetes and metabolic disease, or will it continue or even accelerate its efforts in those areas through business development? Pascal Soriot replied, that's a great question. We recently appointed a highly talented scientist and exceptional leader to replace Sharon as head of research and product development at Alexion. This is not a reflection of a change in strategy or a move away from primary care. In fact, our portfolio has shifted more towards specialty care over the last few years, but primary care remains an important part of our business. We look forward to discussing our projects in knee and cardiovascular medicines in the near future. Mene Pongalos replied, yes, our CVRM, respiratory immunology, and B&I portfolios are very robust and offer many opportunities. We are transitioning to a specialty focus, but primary care remains an important part of our strategy. I'm confident that Sharon will be a great leader for us and will help us continue to build on our successes. Pascal Soriot replied, Sharon's expertise in immunology will be a great asset as we continue to focus on this area. Her experience will help us build on the progress we've already made and ensure that immune. Credit Suisse analyst Matt Weston inquired, Dave, can you please explain the potential impacts of Part D reform on Astra's oral oncology business? Is it a net negative, a wash, or a net positive? Also, when do you expect the OS data to be mature and will you present the PFS data before the OS data is available? Pascal Soriot replied, thank you, Matt. Regarding copays, it's likely to be a small positive for primary care products and a big positive for oncology and other expensive oral medicines. I'll now hand over to Dave to provide more detail on oncology. Dave Fredrickson replied, we estimate that 25 to 30% of our AstraZeneca portfolio is in Medicare Part D. The oral oncolytics are above that average. We anticipate that the ability to have copay capped and smoothed over the year with these expensive oncologics will help reduce the copay exposure for patients in Medicare plans. We expect that this will result in fewer patients needing free goods programs, and we'll keep you updated on that as it unfolds in January 2024 when the copay cap moves down to $3,500. Susan Galbraith replied, thanks for the question, Matt. TL01's final analysis is event rate driven and we will update when we have the projected event rate. To consider the outlook in the maturity, bear in mind that this is a second or third line non-small cell lung cancer patient population. Median OS for these patients is typically 10 to 12 months, which is not a prolonged progression-free survival. Stifel Financial Corporation analyst Eric Lebergaud inquired, can you provide insight into your plans to maintain or grow sales of Soliris and Ultomiris over the next 2 to 3 years, despite the potential for increased competition from biosimilars in Europe? Susan Galbraith replied, thanks for the question about HER3. We have an ongoing clinical collaboration with deruxtecan on the Orchard study, which is looking at the combination of osimertinib and datopotamab deruxtecan in patients with EGFR mutated and non-small cell lung cancer. When making decisions about ADCs, we consider the overall benefit-risk ratio versus our internal and partnered assets. We look forward to seeing the updated clinical data from the World Congress on Lung Cancer, both as monotherapy and in combination with osimertinib. Additionally, we are excited about our internal portfolio, which includes 784 ADC, an EGFR bispecific ADC, and an alpha-targeted ADC with our proprietary link warhead. Mark Dunoyer replied, Eric, thank you for your question on the future of the C5 franchise. Growth is expected to continue with Soliris and Ultomiris through regional expansion and expansion of indications. Additionally, our C5 third-generation, 1720 minibody, is currently in phase 3 trials, which could provide additional options for physicians and patients. Jefferies analyst Peter Welford inquired, what is AstraZeneca's current attitude toward investment in China and how has it changed with recent reforms? Pascal Soriot replied, we are very committed to China and remain a key country for AstraZeneca. We have recently approved the construction of a factory in Qingdao to manufacture inhalers for China and potentially export to other emerging markets. We also have a strong R&D team and are leveraging our connections to partner with local biotech companies to help them develop and commercialize their products globally. China is an important source of innovation for us and has become a strategic center. Leon Wang replied, yes, Pascal covered the topic quite thoroughly. I strongly encourage you to pay attention to emerging markets outside of China, as they are larger and growing faster than China. There are many opportunities for us to explore in terms of untreated and undiagnosed patients. Additionally, we have a number of exciting products and launches in China, such as biologics for Ostara, which provide a source of innovation, manufacturing, and a large market. Pascal Soriot replied, "Our growth outside of China was 38% in the first half of the year, and we've seen strong growth across all emerging markets. We've been working hard to accelerate the approval process for new products, which has contributed to our growth and will continue to do so." Berenberg Capital Markets analyst Louisa Hector inquired, "Mene, given Astra's success with small molecules and antibodies, how does the introduction of novel platforms affect the R&D decision-making process? Does it carry more risk?" Mene Pongalos replied, "Thanks, Louisa. Our pipeline includes both monoclonal antibodies and small molecules, which remain important components. However, we are also investing in next-generation platforms such as gene editing and oligonucleotides to target more complex diseases. This gives us a greater chance of success and opens up more opportunities to attack the biology of the disease." Pascal Soriot replied, "Thank you, Mene, for your insightful question. We appreciate the interest in our company and we are pleased to conclude the Q&A here. Have a great weekend."